Hello and welcome back to another week here at the State of Scottish Football here on A State of Mind. We are live across a multitude of platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn. We're absolutely everywhere at this point. So there's no reason for you not to be tuning in if we're being completely honest. My name is Jack Donnelly and I've not done the Monday show in a while. I've just been a bit busy with moving back to university, but I'm delighted to be back here in my usual slot alongside the two gentlemen you're seeing on the screen alongside me. To my left, we've got one of my good friends, Mr. Stuart Garvey. How are you doing today, mate?
I'm not bad at all. Can't really complain. It's Monday evening, but it's been quite a good Monday.
Has it been a good Monday? I mean, we've
after dissertation work, it's been a good Monday.
I was going to say we've been having our stresses about upcoming dissertations vocalised, I suppose, over the last few hours or so, but we'll get there eventually, I'm sure. And joining myself and Struan just below us there on your screen, we've got Mr. Glenn Struder. Glenn, I mean, first of all, nice to meet you, and second of all, how are you doing?
Yeah, nice to put a face to a name, Jack, although I do watch your shows when you do make an appearance anyway. But yeah, good. A rare Monday off, made up for the Sunday disappointment of another Aberdeen defeat, which I'm sure we'll get into amongst other topics tonight, which I'm looking forward to discussing with you both.
Unfortunately for yourself, we will be getting into it at some point, but we'll start away from Aberdeen for our coverage. Of course, the Monday show genuinely tends to be a bit of a review show from the biggest action of the weekend, and there's a lot of action from the Premiership to get through. And Stuart, we're going to be starting with your boys. I'm sure you're going to be delighted with that because Hibs managed to finally break their hoodoo over St Johnstone at the weekend, running out 1-0 winners at Easter Road yesterday afternoon, courtesy of a Martin Boyle penalty, his 11th goal for club and country this season so far. I mean, even before we get into the game itself, Struan, Martin Boyle's just been an absolute revelation for Hibs this season.
Oh, he's been absolutely fantastic, to be honest. Last season he won Player of the Year, and I thought, he'd maybe have a bit of a dip in form given how good he was last year, but he's arguably gotten better, to be honest. He's been the main creative outlet, he's been the main scoring outlet. He's just been doing everything up front, to be honest. Left wing, right wing. He's just been excellent. It's a joy to have a player like that, and he's obviously signed a new contract as well early doors. There's a couple of rumours about him leaving to both down south and to Aberdeen. Luckily, stayed on, and yeah, it's just been absolutely excellent, to be honest. I'm now wondering how bad things could have been had he left the club.
No, I think they would have been a lot worse off had Martin Boyle chosen to up sticks and leave. Of course, Glenn, he could have potentially been heading up north to Aberdeen. I mean, he's the exact sort of player that you would absolutely love to have in the red of Aberdeen at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, I think when you see the impact that he's got for Hibs and what obviously he's been doing for them this season on the pitch, and we've been kind of missing that sort of creative spark as Ryan Hedges came back into the team and did have some sort of impact, but we've been missing that on a regular basis. And I think it's refreshing to see Martin Boyle do this on a regular stage, because I just hope for him on a personal level he manages to maintain his fitness throughout the season. I suppose Hibs fans will also echo that sentiment as well, because he always seems to hit form and then maybe pick up an injury and be off for a wee while. So yeah, certainly for any Hibs fans that are tuning in, and also Struan, they'll be delighted by what Martin Boyle is producing so far this season.
No, absolutely, completely agree. And Struan, on the game itself, you and I were a bit wary of this fixture coming into the weekend. Of course, it was yourself and me joining Colin Watt on Friday's preview show, and we were both expecting a pretty tight encounter, and that's what we ended up with in the end, just the one goal separating the two sides. But it did go in favour of the home side, with Hibs getting the goal through the Boyle penalty. I mean, how did you take in the game? I mean, you and I were both busy covering the Hibernian women match at the Pennycar Stadium against Celtic, but we managed to kind of catch it on the radio back up the road in my car, essentially. So how were you viewing that game? I mean, were you nervous going in, just knowing that at St Johnstone you didn't really have that good record going up against them? Or were you just looking at this season's form primarily and thinking we should have enough to get past the Saints this time?
It's always a bit of a tricky one, because although Saints haven't started this season, there have been so many occasions in recent years where I felt confident going into this fixture. I'm constantly let down because Saints always manage to pull it out of the bag, and it's just fantastic that Hibs have managed to get over this hurdle. It's the first time in ages that they have beaten St Johnstone. Obviously, the cup final will have been in a lot of people's minds coming into this game, and it was kind of a perfect time to play St Johnstone. You think they've been poor at the start of the season. Obviously, Kerr and Ali McCann have both departed, so there's a couple of weaknesses in that team. And I think as well, Hibs have been undefeated so far this season in the league. They wanted to keep that up against a team who they have a terrible record of. It must have been playing on in the back of their minds, but in the end, it was a good performance. I mean, yeah, it was a penalty at the end of the day, but at the same time, you just need to think about the result and move on from there, really. And it was a really massive 3 points. Just a massive 3 points.
Massive 3 points indeed. And Glenn, let's talk about that penalty, because that was the isolated incident of the match. And Jack Ross himself, he came out after and said he felt a bit of sympathy towards Jamie McCart for conceding it, because there's not really anything he could have done in that situation, to be honest.
No, it's like a penalty that never really. I was obviously awarded, but yeah, I think it's going to be filed under soft. That's where I would file it. What's Jamie McCart supposed to do? Where else is his hand supposed to go? I don't know what John Beaton's thinking in awarding that. It is such a harsh penalty. But when I was listening to you both on Friday, I knew Hibs had a poor record, but until Struan reeled off some of the stats, I didn't realise how poor it was. So it is, obviously it was a huge victory for Hibs, but when the game's swayed on a decision like that, you must be complete and must be absolutely kicking yourself, thinking, what more can we do in terms of getting that rub of the green? In terms of luck, it just seems to be not there for them right now. Okay, they maybe got it the week before, but yeah, these sort of decisions, managers will say they might even themselves out over the course of the season, but you want these decisions to be correct at that time. Unfortunately, in Scotland, we're getting used to sloppy refereeing decisions ultimately costing teams.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit more commonplace up in Scotland than further afield, but I suppose that adds to the character of the game up here in Scotland, of course. Struan, going into it, it was just the one goal that decided it, but the way Jack Ross was going on, I think he explained it as Hibs just needed that little bit of fortune to get something out of this game, and that's really what it came down to, because other than the penalty, which he almost actually saved, Xander Clark put in another assured performance in between the sticks for St Johnstone. So was it a case of just having the luck on the day, or was there a bit more behind the win?
I think Hibs, you could say they deserved the win. I personally don't think it is a penalty. I think it's extremely harsh. I don't see what Jamie McCart is supposed to do in that situation when a ball is blasted at you from about a metre away, apart from turn, and I think it was a really harsh call. But at the end of the day, it could be one of those games where you just do admit, Hibs had the luck on this occasion, and there will be times later on in the season when it goes against them. I think at the end of the day, they deserved the victory. It's a game they really needed to win, the St Johnstone fixture, obviously, to get that sort of mental block away. And obviously, I think Xander Clark, he's been terrific this season for St Johnstone. Although they've had a poor start to the season, he's been a great spark to it so far. I think we'll maybe discuss it later, but he's in the national team as well now, and he's completely deserving of that place.
No, I would agree with that.
Sorry, John. Is that also the first goal St Johnstone have conceded away from home in the league this season as well? So pretty harsh way of conceding your first away goal in the league.
It's a bit difficult, especially with the defensive issues that they've had as well, to be honest. It's nightmare.
They seem to pull it out of the bag when they're travelling away from McDiarmid Park more than they do at home. Comments coming in, as always. We're just checking them as the show goes on. Paul Cotwell, our resident Highby, coming in, obviously having his say on the issue, and he's obviously going for Stonewaller and said that they should have had another Stonewaller pen. Paul, it's always going to be contentious, mate, and it's a harsh call in my view, but I suppose he could have had to make it. I'm not sure. Our own Colin Watt is also in the comments wishing everyone a good evening, and he's saying that a thumbs up on the video would be massively appreciated, and it would. We're trying to build ourselves a profile here at the State of Mind, so any help, any views, likes, shares, whatever you can muster up in support of our podcast here, we would greatly appreciate it. We'll stick with this one for a couple minutes longer. Glenn, looking at St Johnstone the next couple of weeks, there's a couple of massive games for them in the next couple of weeks to come. They welcome both Dundee and Livingston to McDiarmid Park in the next two match days before taking the trip to Glasgow to face Celtic. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that St Johnstone are going to be in and around this position. They're currently sitting ninth. I'm not going to suggest they're going to be in a relegation dogfight, but considering where their season is just now, these are the games that they really need to be winning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's a point that I made last week with Struan that St Johnstone are, typical slow starters to the season. So, maybe there are Saints fans tuning in tonight, probably not overly worried by their positioning. But ultimately, looking at the next two games coming up, obviously teams below them, Dundee have had well-documented struggles in front of goals this season. So, they'll be thinking, right, look at that, 3 points. And then obviously Livingston as well, who've struggled, obviously got their good result against Celtic, but couldn't follow it up at the weekend. So, as fans, you always pick out fixtures and think, yep, that's 6 points before a trip to Celtic. We know, as football fans ourselves, football doesn't work that way. But I think Saints will be looking at that in trying to build up the table, because the table is still quite congested at this early stage of the season. So picking up a few wins can quite easily propel them up the table, and they can start looking upwards, maybe another return to Europe through the league if they can't get a Scottish Cup win again.
I never say never. They're in a fairly decent position, I suppose, at the moment, so always could end up being the case. Stuart, I suppose before we move on, the last thing to mention about this fixture was Liam Craig, captain of the side, became the joint record appearance holder for St Johnstone, equaling the 441 appearances that Stephen Anderson made during his time at the club. Of course, there was a period that he spent at Easter Road, I think, joining the club in 2013, and it's just a very impressive accolade for the midfielder to have picked up over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely massive. I mean, when you say that number, 441 appearances, it's absolutely incredible. I love seeing these stats. It doesn't matter which club, just to see a player has been at a club for that long, the commitment, the levels, and just to see that many appearances, I think is absolutely excellent. And Liam Craig's he's a decent wage player as well, to be honest. So it's nice to see that.
No, absolutely nice to see. That'll do it for Hibs St Johnstone. I suppose it's in the tagline, so we'll have to come to it eventually. We might as well head to Paisley, where St Mirren picked up their first win of the league season with a 3-2 win against Glens Aberdeen. There's a lot to unpack from this one, but we can only start with the away side. 1-0 down to 2-1 up to a man down to 3-2 down. It was just a bit of a mess of an afternoon, unfortunately.
Well, we knew this season was going to be a roller coaster, and it was a roller coaster 90 minutes at Paisley. I mean, the first goal kind of sums up our season in terms of conceding goals, but I thought the way we reacted to going 1-0 down was superb. We showed a bit of character, and Calvin Ramsey again showing, what an excellent player he is with 2 brilliant balls into the box. Scott Brown getting his first Aberdeen goal, albeit he probably knows nothing about it. And then Christian Ramirez, he's been a bit quiet in recent weeks, but what a header and what a way to get your name back on the score sheet. Unfortunately, though, the second half took a turn. Terry Jenks, I think it's, is a second booking. When you're already on a yellow, you can't, lunge in like that. I think when I was watching some of the replays, I think maybe he was lucky it wasn't even a straight red. I know maybe some people maybe disagree with that, but he does kind of looks a bit like a stamp. And then we just go to pieces, concede 2 goals in the space of 10 minutes. The second goal is poor from an Aberdeen point of view, but St Mirren, Jamie McGrath, pulling the strings from midfield. And, I was really impressed by St Mirren as a whole. But Jamie McGrath proving why he was, very much sought after by Aberdeen, Hibs, and amongst others clubs in the summer transfer window. And I'm sure he's put an extra few pounds on his transfer price based on his performance. And, it just had to be, I think the goal was given to Marcus Fraser in the end, but Curtis Main had to be involved after Stevie May scoring the winner previous. It had to be another former striker being involved in the winner. But for me, as from an Aberdeen point of view, what really frustrated me was how poorly Stephen Glass reacted to the red card, and also some of the senior players reacted. Scott Brown seemed to go missing, Lewis Ferguson as well, and towards the end of the game as well, Johnny Hayes with a very horrendous tackle that I think he's lucky to only get booked for. So for me, it was really disappointing the way we kind of lost our heads a little bit and lost any sense of leadership. But if fair play to St Mirren, when teams go down to 10 men, you often think, can they stick in and hold on? But Jim Goodwin showed great awareness, brought on Curtis Main, changed the game, went for it, and they got their just rewards. I can have no complaints. They deserve the 3 points in the end.
Now, we're just looking at the changes in the wake of the red card. Of course, it took 20 minutes for Stephen Glass to actually make those substitutions, and then it was very much for like. There wasn't really anything, I suppose, to balance at the game. But I suppose at that point they were 3-2 down, and I mean, bringing Austin Samuels on for Hedges and the Jet on for Ramirez. It was just very two like-for-like replacements, which was a bit odd that it didn't come sooner, I suppose, was the main talking point, in the fact that there was a lack of reaction, as you said, Glenn. So a bit baffling. And I think you would probably admit yourself, this is a game that Glass really needed to win in order to get people back on side, because it's been a really troubling few weeks for the Aberdeen manager, and this has just added to his list of problems, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I know Paul in the comments is taking great pleasure at our poor run of forms, as he tends to on my own personal podcast as well. But it was a game that we needed to win, given the run of fixtures we've got coming up in October, obviously starting with the visit of Celtic on Sunday. But it's just so frustrating, because the pressure will begin to grow, and we were in that position. And it was talked about on the TV coverage that maybe Declan Gallagher was going to come on when we initially went down to 10 men. And even listening to the player interviews at post-match on Red TV, Christian Ramirez coming out and saying, if we'd maybe held on for 10, 15 minutes, it could have been a different context. The fact that we just kind of dropped our heads and conceded 2 quick goals. But I don't really know if you've got to point the blame at the players on the pitch for, they've got to take some responsibility as well as the manager, for me. But I just didn't agree with the substitutions. Jet's not performed at all this season, so I felt we were almost playing with 9 men when he came on. And then, Ryan Hedges, who was superb, but obviously coming back from an injury, unfortunately. The Wolves loanee that we've got, Austin Samuel, didn't perform as well as St Mirren's Wolves loanee.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people agreeing with you in terms of Ryan Hedges. I mean, JD and Coke in the comments saying, although they've been terrible this season, Hedges is an exciting player, and Aberdeen need him to perform for them to get out of this run. And I completely agree. I thought he started the season in really good form. The injury came at potentially the worst possible time for him. He was just building up that head of steam and was really building on a series of impressive performances. And in amongst these analytical comments, we've got the usual for when Aberdeen get discussed on the show. Plenty of Glass puns, and Colin Watt has been the ringleader. He was loving them on Friday night, and he's just kicked them off. Glass looked shattered at the end of the game. David Bates defending was a real pain for Glass, of course, P-A-N-E. He's having a great time as Colin here on a Monday night, so we're happy. And that was a real stay on Glass's record.
I know, I'm speaking to Colin shortly as well, so he'll be enjoying it. But it might not be long before we break Glass in case of an emergency.
Quite possibly. Struan, away from the Aberdeen side of things, it was a massive 3 points for Jim Goodwin and St Mirren on Saturday. I mean, Conor Ronan scoring 2 goals when the goals have really been lacking for St Mirren up until this point, and the fact that Curtis Main actually got a goal was a bit of a rarity in itself. So a really just overall good performance and a good day for the Buddies on Sunday.
Yeah, massively. I think, just to say quickly, I think Stephen Glass has got a very unfortunate name, the amount of puns you can create from that one. But we spoke on Friday night about Aberdeen's record in Paisley is not the best. I think it was since 2016 since they've had a result there. And again, I think St Mirren will have gone into this game with a lot of confidence. They played really well against Hibs the week before. And obviously, they need to get the first win of the season, and they got it against Aberdeen. It's sort of a perfect time to be Aberdeen when you think of the issues that they've had, and then to have a red card later on in that game as well. They had to think, this was their opportunity, this was their moment. We've spoken about their sort of back three, and they have that stability. They just need to start scoring at the other end if they can do that, and to score 3 goals, against Aberdeen as well, I think was a terrific performance, and it could be a kickstarter for the Buddies, because they really need to get up and going this season.
No, they absolutely do. It's been a tough slog for them so far. I mean, they've kind of become the masters of the draw in the division. I suppose they were in a fairly favourable or a fairly stable position, I would say, in the table up until this win, but it did take that win for them to get themselves up and going. And they've got a couple of favourable fixtures in the next 2, both away trips, but it's Livingston and Ross County who we're expecting both of them to be right down at the bottom come the end of the season as well. So these are games that you would hope can act as a bit more of a springboard for St Mirren and their season going forward. We will head... where do we go next? We've got a pick of them. We'll go up to Edinburgh, back up to Edinburgh, and go to Tynecastle for what some described, one of our good friends, Stuart Jamie McIntosh, a reporter for Energy Sport and the Edinburgh Reporter, described as Robbie Nielsen's best performance in his second spell at Hearts, as Hearts dispatched Livingston 3-0 in Gorgie. Goals from either fullback. You had Michael Smith and Alex Cochrane getting goals either side of a Liam Boyce penalty. Just really, really dominating performance from the Jambos on Saturday afternoon, Stuart.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic, to be honest. I remember actually messaging Jamie during the match saying, is this game as one-sided as the stats suggest? Because I think Hearts had about 70% of the possession, 10 shots going, and it was just dominant. But I think what makes this as impressive is, I know Livingston have been poor this season. Livingston were in really good form going into this game, a massive win against Celtic. You think this was time for them to kickstart their season, and Hearts just played them off the park, to be honest. There's a few question marks as well after their draw with Ross County, but I think Hearts are absolutely excellent. You know, from a Hibs point of view, it's definitely worrying to see how well they are playing under Robbie Nielsen, and it just seems like a lot of things are starting to click. You know, Cammy Devlin and Benny Beningame are a terrific midfield partnership, to be honest. Coming into this season, I didn't know what to expect at all from Beningame, but he has just been one of the players of the season so far. It's painful to see him play for Hearts because he's just that good. And just as a whole, you know, I think Hearts are a really, really good team. And I think the way we came into this season, we were talking about would Hearts be able to crack the top half of the table coming up from the Championship. I think the question has now changed to, are Hearts going to crack European football coming into this? And I think that's just a testament to how well Nielsen and the players have done. The fact that this early into the season, a lot of people are suddenly changing their opinions of Hearts because they do look a really good side. And I'm not quite sure what their weakness is. You know, they started the season off by beating Celtic. They've drawn with Aberdeen. They've drawn from Hibs. 3 of the top 4 from last season, and I wouldn't put it past it to get something from Rangers either.
Well, they just seem to have defied all expectation because I like Euston, was not expecting them to be this high up the table. I mean, I think I'd had them locked in for 7th place or something like that come the end of the year. But it is that point we're looking at them. They've not lost a game yet, and you would imagine you would be almost distraught almost if they did end up 7th. It's an odd thing to picture at this point in time, the fact that this Hearts team could drop as far as 7th, but I suppose stranger things will have happened. But Glenn, I suppose in this game we saw a bit more of a change in system, or a return to a system, because it was a switch from the usual 3 at the back for Hearts against Ross County away in Dingwall last weekend, and they suffered. They lost 2 goals and they ended up having to fight back for the draw. But the return to the more familiar formation really helped that team excel and settle into what was a really impressive performance on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I think certainly at Tynecastle they seem to get the formation right. And, you know, everyone always speaks as, you know, Tynecastle being a bit of a fortress, and they really kind of maybe started turning it into a fortress again this season. You know, Struan made the point about how they were unbeaten at home to Celtic, Hibs and Hearts this season already. And that was the one thing that I had written in my notes, you know, for this was, who's going to stop Hearts this season? You know, they're unbeaten and they're just looking so impressive. And like both of you have kind of touched on, I really wasn't expecting much from Hearts this season. I thought they might struggle to find their feet in the top division. And Robbie Nielsen is really impressing me. You know, like you touched on there, he made the change in formation. It didn't work in Dingwall. Change back, and you know, you get a dominant 3-0 victory. He's making this managerial work look very easy in the top flight. And yeah, Hearts rightly probably are looking towards, you know, European football. You know, why not?
Why not, indeed. Struan, Glenn made the point there about kind of turning Tynecastle back into a fortress. And we've seen what Tynecastle can be like over the past couple of seasons. It can be absolutely terrible to go to if you're an away player, but at points it can be awful to go to as a home player, because it can just produce a toxic atmosphere amongst its own supporters. We saw that in the season that saw them relegated. We saw that a lot through the Championship season. But just now, if you want to be absolutely anywhere in the world as a Hearts player, you want to be at Tynecastle because everything's absolutely rosy at the moment.
Yeah, you know, I remember the opening games of the season and Celtic versus Hearts at Tynecastle, and watching from home, the atmosphere stood out to me more than just about anything that happened on the pitch. It was absolutely fantastic. And I mean, obviously, as I keep saying, you know, I'm a Hibs fan, but I was just enjoying hearing fans back at a stadium again. And you could tell these fans hadn't been there for months, you know, this season in the Championship. And it was like the ideal start to the season, I think, is the way you put it for Hearts, and the way the fans have responded. I think they deserve this. I'm jealous of the fact as well that Hearts are now the biggest fan-owned club in Britain. There's a lot of positivity around that club right now, and you can see it coming out from the fans both on social media and in the stadium and stadia across the country when they're going away. It's just a really, really good time to be a Hearts fan at the moment. Things are looking up, as Glenn's saying there. Robbie Nielsen is making this managerial stuff look easy, to be honest. He's doing really, really well. And he's a very young manager himself. There was obviously a lot of questions as well coming into this, whether he was good enough. Obviously promoted Dundee United and he went back to the Championship with Hearts. He's looking absolutely excellent, to be honest, at the moment. And yeah, it's hard to really come up with many negative points on Hearts. It's really difficult. I'd love to, believe me. I'd love to have some sort of negativity, some reason that they're going to be relegated this season. But no, Hearts are flying at the moment.
Well, they absolutely are. And Glenn Struan mentioned the pair of them just fleetingly, just in his opening statement about the game. But Benny Baningime and Cammy Devlin just look set to be a monstrous centre mid partnership for Hearts to build on. And that says a lot when you've still got players in the squad like Andy Halliday. You've got Peter Haring coming back from an injury and kind of getting back into some first team football again. Even youngsters like Aaron McKenna, who just seems to have dropped off the face of the earth since Baningime came in. It's just a really, really impressive partnership that Hearts have been able to unearth in the middle of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. And Beningme was the player that really stood out for me. I was at the Aberdeen Hearts game earlier in the season, and the way he bossed the midfield and ran the show for Hearts, I was like, where did they pick this guy up from? And then someone said, oh yeah, they signed him from Everton. I was like, how have they gone about that and kept it so under the radar? But yeah, I think Struan said, could prove to be one of the signings of the season. And I totally agree, because I think he's shown this season in all of the games so far how impressive he's been. And Cammy Devlin obviously gaining rave reviews as well. And I think a lot of Scottish football games seems to be won or lost in the midfield. It was kind of a point I made last season a lot in Aberdeen, that we seem to be a bit powder puff in midfield and teams dominated us that way. And when you've got a fortress at home and a really strong core of your team, it's two really strong combinations there, obviously now for Hearts producing the right results. And if they can keep both of them fit for long periods of time, then obviously they would want to build on that success. Because you touched on there players like Andy Halliday currently out the team, and Peter Haring obviously with an injury. If you change your team constantly, these players don't get enough time to gel and understand each other. So Hearts are possibly benefiting from these players, playing regularly and impressing as well. And let's see how long they can keep that up for. As Struan said, you want to find some negatives about it, but you can't. And to be fair, you've just got to doff your cap really, because they're doing the right stuff just now.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I feel like we do need to move on from Hearts specifically, because there was another team in this game, and I feel like Paul Cockwell might actually come for me personally if I try to load any more praise onto Hearts. Struan, there was another team in this match, Livingston, of course, and they had an absolutely spectacular weekend last time out with that 1-0 win at home over Celtic. But they really did just crash down to earth on this occasion. They just didn't look like the side that defeated Ange Postecoglou's side last weekend at all.
Yeah, I don't know if that possibly just sums up Livingston, to be honest. Even when things are looking good, just the quality perhaps isn't there. It's a shame, because I'm seeing a lot of calls for Martindale to be sacked and people doubting him. Whereas last season, basically during the winter months, everybody loved Martindale and Livingston, and I personally did. I thought it was a great story. I loved what was happening, and I was desperate for them to win the League Cup as well at the time. And it's just a shame the way things have gone for Livingston. Obviously, I think I'm going to stay positive from a Livingston point of view and say that game, I think I'd rather praise Hearts than criticise Livingston, because although they have lost again, there are still reasons to be optimistic from a Livingston point of view. Hearts were just incredible. I think there were many teams in the Premiership Hearts probably would have walked over with that kind of performance, and it was just unfortunate that Livingston were the team. I'd love to see Livingston get back on their feet, and yeah, I think they can. I think they need to remember the fact that they did beat Celtic. That's a massive performance from them. And I don't want to see David Martindale going anywhere anytime soon, because I love him basically. I think he's great, and I just hope things do work out for Livingston.
And that is the thing with this Livingston side that we've come to know over the last 12 months or so. They just do have the bite. They do have the ability to just break in and get a result from the most kind of unlikely of circumstances. We saw that over the 14-game run last season. We saw it against Celtic, and there's no doubt that they do have the capability in them to do it again. So hopefully we see that side of Livingston return a bit more frequently than we have seen thus far this season. Let's move on, and we'll go to the other side in the flag, in the title card, rather. Sorry, I couldn't get my words there. We've got Celtic, and I know a lot of people in the comments will have their own opinions on what we're about to talk about in regards to Celtic, and we are more than happy to hear them all. We are just giving our opinions, of course, and hopefully we'll be able to have a good discussion. But Celtic dropped points again this weekend, drawing 1-1 at home to Dundee United. Lyle Abada opened the scoring before Ian Hart scored the second and 2 to earn the Arabs a point. Fun fact about Ian Hart, for those that missed it, his wife Sarah actually scored the opening goal in Celtic's 2-1 win over Hibernian at the weekend that Stuart and I were at. And I think that, barring records that the Boyles might have set, I believe they're the first husband and wife combo to score on the same day in Scottish football. So there's a bit of history in that goal, I suppose you can say. It's tough to know where to begin with this one, Glenn, because I think questions could start. I think it's at the point we're at in the season now that you could potentially start asking questions. And I'm not saying for a second that there should be any drastic action being taken against Mr. Postecoglou, but I think there's probably a fair allowance for you to start questioning Ange Ball, as it's been dubbed at the moment in time.
Yeah, and I suppose it's almost the same as Aberdeen fans questioning Glass Ball, as we've been dubbing it. Both clubs are in transition. It's too early. You're only 7 games into the season to have that knee-jerk reaction or hit the proverbial panic button. I watched the highlights on Sports Scene before we came on live tonight, and Celtic created so many chances again. It just didn't appear to be their day, hitting the woodwork 3 times. But I think Ange's getting a bit unlucky with injuries. James McCarthy going off injured after that heavy challenge with Fuchs, and Juranovic as well, who was filling in at left back, also going off injured. So he's not really been helped. And again, it was something touched on last week. Callum McGregor, Kyogo also out. When you can't get your best players in, you're going to struggle. If I was a Celtic, I will take encouragement by opportunities in a 90-minute game Celtic are creating. They look like scoring every time they go forward. Dundee United, you could maybe argue got lucky to come away with a point. Dundee United fans might say it was well earned, but yeah, there's certainly reason optimistic. But when you're a manager of a club such as who've had such a successful few years, there's obviously going to be expectation and demand to bring success back to Celtic after the poor season last year. So he might get the noises from the support, but I think you've got to put a bit of perspective on the situation.
No, you absolutely do. I think every situation you need to put some perspective on it. Colin coming in again saying, why is everything a ball? Hope that Dominic Ball never gets a managerial role playing ball. I think they just call it ball squared at that point, Colin. Stuart, I suppose there are positives to take for Celtic coming out of this game, as there always are for every team. There can be positives to take away. And I suppose one thing you can say is that Lyle Abada has continued in his hot streak of form. And to be honest, for me, he's probably been Celtic's best signing of the window. I feel like he just pops up every week with a goal. He just seems to score week in, week out at this point. And I think his contributions will probably start being noticed a bit more now that Kyogo Furuhashi's been sidelined for a while.
Yeah, I think Lyle Abada has been absolutely excellent. He came in the summer and nobody really knew who he was. And he's basically locked down that right wing position. He's still only 19. I think that's incredible the way that he's come into this team and he's forced his way into the starting 11. And he really has been one of the bright sparks. Obviously Kyogo came in, but as you said, with his injury, somebody's going to need to step up at times. And I think Lyle Abada can do that. It's interesting as well that Jota, who was signed from Benfica on loan, a lot of people think he's better off the right wing being right-footed. It's possibly a bit more natural to him. But I think Lee Labada can force him over to that left-hand side, because I really do think he has been one of the best players, especially if you go back to the start of the season where things were really poor for Celtic right at the start of Postecoglou. He was that shining light. He was playing well when others weren't. With players like Ryan Christie and Odsonne Edouard were in that front three, he was still the best performing player. And I feel going forward this season, he really can be a bit of a difference maker. And at the same time, I do think that's a bit of a shame to sort of put that kind of pressure on a 19-year-old. But I've been really impressed with him, to be honest. And I think I would say he's been Celtic's best player in my eyes anyway this season. One of them at least. I think he's been fantastic.
No, I would completely agree with you, mate, to be honest. I think he's definitely stood out most for me, especially while Furuhashi has been on the sidelines. Glenn, let's take a quick look at Dundee United, because, I mean, you said it yourself, they did have to kind of batten down the hatches and absorb a fair few chances, but they did so effectively, and there was a lot of praise for Jandro Fuchs on social media. I think a lot of Dundee United fans know for a fact, or have it in their heads already, that they'll probably lose into a bigger team come the summer, so they're just having to appreciate him while they've got him. And if he's putting in performances like that every weekend, they're going to have an absolutely brilliant season of just watching him for 90 minutes every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I'm sure some of the Celtic fans in the comments, wherever they're tuning in tonight, might have an opinion on whether or not he should have still been on the pitch for a prolonged period of time in that challenge with McCarthy. Because when I watched it earlier, probably a 50-50, but the way he goes in, you could have maybe understood if there was a certain coloured card produced. But he's an exciting player. I didn't think he really got the chance last season under Mickey Mellon on a regular enough basis. As a player that's got pace to burn, but he's kind of come into his own under Tam Courts this season and been a real engine for that midfield for Dundee United. Running up and down box to box and providing kind of a bit of a creative spark as well, alongside Harkes. And something kind of United have maybe missed since the Armstrong and GMS days. It's maybe a big bold shout for to say, but it's certainly United need that spark to get some consistency going. But another fantastic result from a United point of view. You look at what they've already done this season, beating Rangers, winning the Dundee Derby, and then going to Parkhead and getting a draw. And, we've not even come to that penalty shout as well.
Yeah, there was a penalty shout in that match, and there's been a lot of contention, and I'm sure you two have both got your opinions. I'm sure everyone in the comments is going to have an opinion on that particular shout. But I'm never one that likes to spend an awful lot of time dissecting refereeing decisions too much. So I'll just take a yes or no answer from both of you. Was it a penalty? Struan?
Yes. I'm leaning towards yes.
Leaning towards yes. Glenn, how about yourself?
It's a stone mauler for me.
So, well, I'd probably inclined to agree with yes as well. So I'd imagine a lot of people in the comments are going to have the same opinion as that. We've got a couple of more games to cover here on the State of Scottish Football before we take a look ahead to a bit of an announcement from Mr. Steve Clarke tomorrow. We'll head over to the other team in Glasgow in the Premiership. We've got Rangers. They took a trip up to Dens Park and ran out 1-0 victors over bottom side Dundee. It was a bit of a stumble last weekend against Motherwell at home, Struan, with the Steelmen taking a 1-1 draw away from Ibrox. But they went up north, first against last, and you kind of had them painted for a win regardless. But they kind of made it a bit more difficult than they had to in getting this one, didn't they?
Yeah, it's another occasion where I just don't think Rangers have been that good, and they've come away with the 3 points. It's the classic tag of, oh, that's champions for you, even when they're playing badly, they win. But I think that's true at the moment. They've really not been impressed by Rangers on that many occasions this season. Aribo's gotten the goal. I think he's quite a good player on his day. But other than that, there weren't too many things about Rangers in this game that I was impressed with as well. Obviously, Lee Griffiths getting an injury was a bit of a shame, and you'd maybe say he could have scored that penalty. For me, it was definitely a penalty. I don't think there's any question about that. I think, obviously, the double jeopardy rule saves McLaughlin from getting a red card as well. And then it's a pretty good penalty save against Jason Cummings. Seeing Jason Cummings standing over a penalty, I'm never really sure what to make of with his history. But yeah, it was It's a big opportunity, and if Dundee had scored that and taken a point from that, I don't think Rangers could have really complained. To be perfectly honest, they weren't anything spectacular, and it's a game where you expect them to win, as you say, top versus bottom. But again, it's another victory by just one goal, and that seems to be a common theme of Rangers this season, is these grinding out results. The players aren't linking up well like they used to. They're not as strong. I remember Alan Hutton, who was on the BT Sports Score at the weekend, was making the point that they're just not as ruthless and aggressive, and the chances that you see last season they would take, they're just not doing it the same. I don't know whether there's an instance of fatigue potentially in that team. I'm not sure what the issue is, but there are just so many times this season where you think, if this was last season, Ryan Kent buries that chance, or Tavernier puts in a much better delivery, Goldson does better there, that save's made. There's so many occasions where you think they could do better. I think Ryan Jack could come in and make a big difference into that midfield, because it's been chopping and changing. John Lundstrom had a pretty good performance. If I have to give some praise to a Rangers player, I think John Lundstrom was pretty good. Obviously, he's received a lot of criticism, and I think rightly so. I think he's been quite poor coming from down south, but yeah, he looked good at the weekend, and it's just weird, because I want to give Rangers a bit more criticism, but at the same time they're getting these results, and you just have to applaud them for that.
My mic's muted. There we go. Happens just about once every show. I suppose when it does come down to it, though, football is a results business, and they are going above and beyond to get these results. But Glenn Strachan makes an interesting point. I mean, you've got these players like Tavernier and Goldson who were on top of the world last year and were absolutely flying. They've really not hit those same heights. I mean, fair enough. Rangers did set incredibly high standards during that league campaign last year. But is there one kind of identifiable factor as to why they've kind of dropped off? Is it fatigue playing a part? Is it complacency potentially? Or is it a combination of a number of different factors?
The biggest factor for me is the fact that crowds are back in football. I said it last season. I think Rangers were the team that benefited most from playing games behind closed doors. You mentioned about Hearts thriving off the support currently at Tynecastle. I think one of the other grounds in Scotland where fans can turn toxic really quickly is Ibrox. I know this game was played at Dens Park, but similar to Celtic, there is a pressure and expectation that comes from playing for Rangers. And I think there's possibly the players, and we don't often see some of the defensive frailties. Well, we certainly didn't last season. And I think Rangers are looking very frail defensively. Okay, they're still keeping a few clean sheets, but some of the mistakes that are creeping into their game, we just didn't see them last season. And Strachan made a good point about the kind of clinical nature that we saw last season, again, not seeing this season. Is that because, is there some, external pressure playing on the minds, as well as, some of the points you made there about fatigue and complacency? But yeah, for me, I think it's possibly a bit of the pressure that the crowds being in there. We've already seen them drop more points already this season than they did last season as well. So yeah, that's what I would say from my point of view it's down to.
I think there has been a lot of rumblings about how the crowds have played a part in teams coming back, and I know there's some differing opinions. JD and Cole coming in the comments once again, saying that crowds affecting Rangers are a myth. Some of Rangers' most impressive performances have come in front of fans, and that was certainly true. I mean, you think of those Europa League nights before the pandemic hit, and how electric Ibrox was. When Rangers, I think was it Braga? I think I'm right in saying at home. I think they got the really good result against them, made it through to the last 16, and that was massive for Rangers, of course.
So there's a bit of difference between Europe and domestic, I think.
Yeah, and one-offs to like a whole season. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I suppose the point that JD and Coke makes there is he's right. There were some impressive performances, but it's all fine and well doing them on the European stage. We've got to do it more regularly on the domestic stage, as Strachan says. It's difficult to compare a one-off game to over this course of a season. Yeah,
no, I completely. Yeah, that's complete. It was just the first.
Yeah, no, totally seen it.
The first example that jumped to my mind, of course. Back to this game, Strachan. I mean, I suppose one man that was getting a lot of attention coming into it was a certain Mr. Lee Griffiths, of course. not exactly covered himself in much glory over the last week or so, but he looked to be kind of targeting Rangers backline fairly early on and was seeing a fair bit of the ball and creating some fairly decent chances for himself to score midway through the half. But he did have to be kind of pulled from the game just before half time, probably around the 40th minute or so, and what's been described as a kind of reoccurring ankle injury. Now, when you're Dundee, you've hardly scored a goal all season. You're sitting bottom. You're still looking for a win, and you're kind of putting pressure on the champions a little bit. And you think you could potentially get something out of this. Losing the man you signed to score goals in the last couple of days of the window that early on into a game, you're thinking it's an absolute nightmare, aren't you?
Yeah, you couldn't have made it up. I know a lot of people were wanting that sort of storyline to this game where Lee Griffiths scores against Rangers, of course, with the Celtic history, but it just wasn't the case, to be honest. And we've spoken a few times about how Lee Griffiths can bring that X factor to Dundee, pardon me, that he can come up with goals out of nowhere. We've seen his finishing ability, a free kick, a penalty, a set piece. He's got a lot in his locker. He's good in the air. He's a finisher, and that's exactly what Dundee need, because let's face it, Killian Sheridan and even Jason Cummings, they're not going to score you 20, 30 goals a season. They're not going to do that anytime soon for Dundee. So they need someone who can put the ball in the back of the net, because they really need results coming their way at the moment. And I look at that team and I just don't see goals. I just don't see where goals can come from. And I was thinking about the fact that Jason Cummings took the penalty. I think he must be about third in their pecking order when Charlie Adams and Lee Griffiths are both fit. I don't think Cummings is coming into many games expecting to be the one taking penalties, but at the same time, they got the opportunity and they missed it in this game. I think it's definitely concerning because they need to score soon. I mean, obviously, you have to take this with a grain of salt. It is Rangers, they're the best team in the country. You're expecting them to beat you, but at the same time, you've had the opportunity with that penalty, and at the end of the day, it's just not gone your way. And something really does need to change. If Griffiths is out for a prolonged period, then I think that's a big issue, because obviously he's come into the side with goals. That's why they've brought him in, because he can make that difference. And if he is going to be out for a sustained period, then I think that's a massive blow for Dundee.
You not put your faith in Killian Sheridan, Struan, no?
Oh, a handful of goals perhaps this season. 3, 4 maybe.
Set your bar quite high for him there, of course.
They play us in a few weeks.
You never know. That could be his redemption arc against Aberdeen in a few weeks' time.
It could. Hat-trick. Watch him prove me wrong.
We're going to have to come back to this if Killian Sheridan scores a hat-trick against Aberdeen in a few weeks.
I'll be unavailable that day.
No, you'll want to make yourself available just for a
So might I.
Moving on to the last game of the Premiership weekend, we had Motherwell picking up another win, defeating Ross County at Fir Park 2-1. That's 6 unbeaten in the league for Graham Alexander's Steelmen. They've just really gone about their business effectively, efficiently, and fairly under the radar, Glenn. It's been quite impressive, actually, putting it into perspective.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you said there about the way they're going about their business. And still, even after their result of the weekend, no one seems to be talking about them. Obviously, we are now on this show, but in terms of the mainstream media, no one's giving them that attention. And probably Graham Alexander's enjoying it being that way, because he won't want the focus on their players. They've recruited well over the summer. I spoke about last week Kevin Van Veen, a player that they signed up front, causing loads of problems for defences so far this season, and Kane Woolery adding a lot of pace to the front line as well down the wings. But when I saw the result go, the score go 1-1 on Saturday, I thought, this will be interesting. Let's see how they respond, and it'll be, if they can, turn this around and get 3 points, then maybe we should start taking Motherwell seriously, because I was still maybe a bit pessimistic about whether or not they will come good this season, but Tony Watt doing what Tony Watt's been doing so far this season and popping up and getting the winner. And I think for Motherwell, having a regular goal scorer is going to be crucial, maybe something they lacked last season. And Tony Watt has really come to the fore. I don't know what he's been doing in pre-season, because he looks like a player reborn. And I think, Struan, you made the point to me last week, it's mad to say a player reborn given how old he actually is.
No, Struan, you were actually speaking Tony Watt's praises on an Energy Sport podcast that we were recording this afternoon. I mean, he really just has come on leaps. As you said, it's so weird to say he's come on leaps and bounds since kind of coming back to Motherwell over the summer. But it's just been massively impressive for the start of the season.
Yeah, he's been absolutely incredible. I just want to bring up Colin Watt's comment in the chat there saying that if Killian Sheridan scores, I'll shave my head. But that was a regular occurrence during lockdown, was bald.
You do that anyway, I was going to say.
Yeah. But Tony Watt has been absolutely fantastic, to be honest. And it is interesting, he turns 28 later on this year, but it's quite fitting that he's sort of coming into those prime years. And he's been absolutely fantastic. He's been a real bright spark to Motherwell. And I really like the connections that they've got in that team. Obviously, Kevin Van Veen, who Glenn just mentioned as well, I think he's been excellent. He came into the season and I had no idea who he even was. And he's one of these players who I just enjoy watching. He just makes the game look easy at times. And Tony Watt it's just been superb. There was a couple of times last season where Devante, Cole and Watt would link up quite well. And it seemed like they had a good connection up front. Of course, there was Sheridan Seedorf as well. And it looked like they were building something, but it never quite got going. But as Glenn said as well, I don't know what Tony Watt's been up to in pre-season, but he's just been fantastic so far this season. And I mean, obviously a lot of people have always said he's never quite hit the heights that he was once expected to at Celtic, but now he really is looking like a good striker, and he's making a big difference to that Motherwell side who have been absolutely fantastic. I mean, they've only lost once and it was on the opening day, and since then they've been incredible, really.
Well, they really have. There's been a number of kind of standout names in this Motherwell side. I mean, Van Veen and Watt aside, you had Callum Slattery, who's been doing really well in midfield. Obviously, he just got his first goal at the weekend. An absolutely lovely finish into the top right-hand corner as well. The centre-half parent of Yohani Ojala and Ricky Lamy as well, they've been brilliant. Lamy, again, picking up another assist. And it's just been a really entertaining team to watch. Of course, they've got an international goalkeeper in between the sticks and Liam Kelly. Whether he actually plays international football is yet to be seen. We've not actually seen the proof in that pudding, but potentially in the next few weeks or so, we don't know. We might be getting onto that discussion in a few minutes. I suppose, Glenn, when you saw that game go 1-1 at the weekend, I just kind of had it in my mind that in one way, shape or form, before I saw the goal scorer, I kind of had that feeling that Regan Charles-Cook had been involved. I feel like since he joined, he's just been the one out-and-out source of creativity and goal-getting in that Ross County side.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only seen Ross County once this season, obviously when they came down to play Aberdeen, and he was at the heart of most of their attacks alongside Ross Callaghan. But Regan Charles-Cook was the one that was, having the shots on goal. And you're totally right. It's no surprise that once again he was at the heart of everything. I don't know if he'll probably claim it was a shot, but it looked more of a cross. And Liam Kelly will probably be disappointed at the concession of that goal, because I do think he's also been another key part to Motherwell's excellent start, having that bit of quality in between the sticks. But from a Ross County view, having Regan Charles, I think he'll start gaining confidence from the involvement he's been having going forward. Is scoring at Pittodrie, scoring at Fir Park, gaining a few assists as well this season. Ross County just need to get maybe Jordan White to get a few goals, because they're getting themselves into games. But you look at the result last week, 2-1 up, ends 2-2, 1-1 away from home. Fortunately, they slumped to a 2 defeat. But from what we saw at the beginning of the season, there's encouragement they could maybe see themselves safe from the bottom two spaces in the league this season.
Yeah, I suppose it just really does depend on these kind of big players, depending on how they pick up their form towards the kind of business end of the season. And I suppose we're going to have to be all over that here on the State of Scottish Football for the season as it continues. To round out the show tonight, we are going to be having a little bit of a discussion on the men's national team. Came out today that Steve Clarke is going to be announcing his squad for the World Cup qualifiers against Israel and the Faroe Islands. Of course, that Israel game is being played in front of a confirmed to be sold out Hampden Park. I'm lucky enough to have a ticket for that game, and I'm absolutely ecstatic to see Steve Clarke win his first game against Israel at his 5th attempt. Doesn't paint a pretty picture when you put it into perspective, does it? How are we feeling about these two games coming up? I mean, is it nerves knowing that we can realistically secure second if we beat Israel? Are we more excited just to see Scotland back playing again? Where are we feeling on the Scotland standpoint at the moment?
I'm excited.
I can't wait for that Israel game.
It's going to be massive. I cannot. Are you going, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm also like you, lucky enough to have a ticket, and I actually have a spare ticket as well. So might be Mr. Popular in a few weeks' time.
Oh, absolutely. You're going to have a lot of people dropping you a message to see if they can get along. Well, I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen with the games until they come, but we will have a fair idea of who's going to be included with the squad being announced tomorrow. I suppose we're not going to expect a lot of changes from the Scotland squad, first and foremost. We'll say that immediately, because it's something that Steve Clarke's built a reputation for himself for as the Scotland manager. He likes having that base of players, that familiarity between the group. So, I mean, if you were to go position by position, you start with the goalkeepers. You've got Craig Gordon, Liam Kelly, and Zander Clark, and Struan. You'd be a bit shocked to see any of the three replaced by another goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think those three are perfect at the moment, to be fair. I wouldn't be surprised if John McLaughlin possibly finds his way back into this team, but at the same time, I don't think Liam Kelly deserves to be dropped. We've just spoken about Motherwell there for a while. He's been excellent. Zander Clark as well, great for St Johnstone. And Craig Gordon has probably been the best goalkeeper in the Cinch Premiership so far. And for the Scotland national team, he's hardly really put a foot wrong, to be fair. He might be turning 39 soon, but in my eyes, I envisage him as our keeper for the foreseeable future.
I mean, I would say the same. I think he has been established as number one for a reason. I suppose the only other option you could potentially see is John McLaughlin coming back into the fold for one of Kelly or Clark, but I'm not sure whether Clark would go. Steve Clarke, that is go down that route of bringing someone back in when he's had the three in the most recent camp. I suppose, Glenn, looking at the defence, there's going to be one notable absence in the back line, and that's going to be Greg Taylor, of course. Well, I say notable absence, I mean, doesn't really get a kick, so I mean, it's not really going to be the biggest loss, thankfully, because we need all the defenders we can get our hands on. Taylor's not going to be there, obviously he's injured, and his kind of ready-made replacement, you were expecting potentially an Aaron Hickey or a Josh Doig to potentially come into the fold. They've been confirmed to be in the under-21 squad, so we're not going to see either of them in the main team at this camp anyway. But could you see any surprise inclusions come into defence? I know there's a certain defender in maroon that's been getting a lot of plaudits recently that could potentially be angling for a call-up ahead of someone like, I don't know, Scott McKenna potentially dropping out. I'm not sure. So would you change anything massive about the defence, or would you stick with what we've got at the moment?
Well, the big one for me is, you mentioned Greg Taylor not being, fit enough for the squad, is the fact that Grant Hanley suspended for that Israel game. That's huge. And I had it in the notes as John Souttar as being, maybe one of those that might be waiting by the phone for a call-up, or you never know, he might have received it tonight. And it'll be interesting because we do need someone to fill that gap that Grant Hanley's going to leave for what is going to be the crucial game of this double header coming up. But we all know that Clarke is often reluctant to make changes. So would we then see Scott McTominay maybe drop back into defence? And then obviously that maybe opens up a position in midfield. So yeah, I've put down John Souttar. You mentioned there are other defenders, Josh Doig. I'm going to say Calvin Ramsey, why not?
No, why not indeed? I mean, there's definitely going to be a bit more competition at right back in the years to come, and we're going to be grateful for it, considering how blessed we've been down the left-hand side in years to come. And I suppose once Robertson and Tierney move on to pastures green past the world of football, we will have that combination of Doig and Hickey down the left, hopefully for a number of glorious years in the blue of Scotland. Struan, into the midfield, though, we've got one returning face, you would imagine, in Scott McTominay. But we've got one departure from the squad, and that Callum McGregor is not going to be available due to his injury, which is the biggest loss from this batch of players that we're going to see, because in my eyes, he was absolutely fantastic in both games against Moldova and Austria. Yeah,
I don't think McGregor gets much praise at all on a Scotland shirt. I think there are many players who get the credit ahead of him, but for me, I think he's absolutely excellent, to be fair. He's one of those players who for the national team just goes about his business and rarely will put in a bad game for Scotland, to be honest, in that midfield. I think it's a massive loss. I don't know who comes straight into that midfield. Obviously, McTominay is such a difficult one for Scotland because he's one of our best players, but you don't know whether he's going to be played as a 6 and 8 or if he's going to be into the back 3. It's quite hard to know where Steve Clarke's going to play him. But if we're going to call up another midfielder, and I'd love to see Liam Henderson. I know he hasn't really had many chances at all for Scotland. I just like to see something different. You know, he's playing in the Serie A now in Italy's top division. I just love to see him getting the team, even if he doesn't play. Just get him in the squad. I'd love to see that.
That's a really interesting shit, actually. I hadn't even considered Liam Henderson for a moment.
Yeah.
That's something to think about. Yeah, I suppose
just something different, You know, a bit of a youngster coming in.
It's actually a good point you make about Callum McGregor. You know, missing out. I'd kind of forgotten that. Obviously, remembered he was injured for Celtic, but forgot that would be a miss for Scotland as well. And I think as well, Ryan Jack's also been a huge miss, and you know, it was a good point you made there about how well Callum McGregor stepped up recently. And I suppose your natural replacement would have maybe been Ryan Jack in that position. But yeah, Scott McTominay, it'd be interesting to see where he fits in, if it's going to be midfield or in place of Grant Hanley.
No, absolutely. And that's what Graham Caldwell coming in the comments saying he would play McTominay in midfield if McGregor's missing. I think that probably is going to be the ready-made replacement, as you were saying. Then the striking options last time out, we had Che Adams, Ryan Christie, Lyndon Dykes, Ryan Fraser, James Forrest and Kevin Nisbet, all categorised as forwards. I'm not sure if I would change anything big. I mean, there's been a lot of love for Tony Watt. I'm not sure whether that's going to warrant a call-up to the national side or not, but... you never know with Steve Clarke, and I suppose the outline question that's been dominating for the last few camps, what's the situation with Ryan Gauld, whether that's even going to be a possibility. I mean, is there anything either of you guys would change, or would you be more than happy to go with a set of forwards that we've had in the last camp?
I'd be okay, but I mean, I guess you could always use the term, if there is ever a time for Tony Watt to get into the Scotland squad, it could be now. Not many of the international strikers are on great form for the club. You know, Kevin Nisbet, for example, and Che Adams haven't been great. Tony Watt started well. If there ever is a time to throw him into the national side, it might be this one. Just saying. Possibly.
How about yourself, then? How do you feel?
Ryan Fraser's still injured, as far as I'm aware. So there's obviously a space in the striking section there. And Kevin Nisbet's not exactly been on electric form for Hibs. I think, did he come on as a sub at the weekend, or did he start?
He started, but
did he start? But yeah, he's not been scoring recently. But with Steve Clarke, you never know. I was really impressed by the way Lyndon Dykes and Che Adams worked in Vienna in that last game. So I would like to see them, you know, given more game time instead of us just chopping to one up top to two up top every second game. Give them time to form a partnership. But you know, there's a space there. Tony Watt's in form. You know, Struan said, you know, a lot of the strikers from last squad, they're not in form. Strikers is not exactly a position we've been blessed with in recent years. So
you're right.
Why not?
Well, we'll be covering that squad as it comes out tomorrow night on the State of Scottish Football, because we're wrapping up here. We've gone a little bit over time, but I'm sure no one's going to mind a couple extra minutes of this content. Thank you very much to everyone for interacting, for watching, for commenting, for leaving a like on the video. It's massively appreciated. Thank you massively to Struan Garvey and Glenn Schroeder for joining me this evening on this Monday night. We're going to be back at the same time in the same place for the rest of the week and beyond throughout the entire season. So make sure you subscribe to the State of Mind on YouTube to make sure you get this live stream as soon as it goes live at 6 o'clock every weekday. My name's Jack Donnelly. This has been the State of Scottish Football on A State of Mind. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.